Today I'm rebuilding a PC that cost a ridiculous $10,000 10 years ago. I'm gonna overclock it and we'll see what it can do in modern games. Let's start with the heart of our computer, the CPU, and I got a whole flock of them here. The i7-6900K used to be a cool processor and cost $1,000. Two of them would already be $2K. Three would be $3K. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm good at math. But four of these CPUs would already be serious money. Still, none of them can compare to today's hero, the unlocked i7-6950X with 10 cores and 20 threads, which launched at $1,700 in 2016. As you can probably tell from the size of these CPUs, this is for the server-grade LGA 2011 V3 socket. These Pokemon had 8 cores, and back then that was more than enough for almost everything. Then I honestly don't even know who, besides enthusiasts, would have needed a CPU like this 10 years ago. I found the motherboard almost in a full original bundle from those years. Just look at this queen of budget gaming builds. The ASUS ROG Rampage V Edition 10. Which was the top board for the LGA 2011 V3 socket and cost $600 at launch. I don't know how many power phases it has, but I think it's enough considering it has 2 CPU power connectors, 8 plus 4 pin. The board itself is eATX and weighs almost 2 kilograms. As you can see, back then they already had connectors for NVMe drives, and right here it's PCIe 3.0 with support for basically any drive length. There was also a special focus on audio here because the sound on this thing is just beautiful. Supreme FX is no worse in quality than good external sound cards. These upper switches let you enable and disable the PCIe slots, and the lower ones control the memory channels. There are 4 of them here. A very handy feature. I actually used them myself when the memory refused to boot because of overclocking, right up until my D channel died. Besides that, it has a postcode display, power and reset buttons, and also safe boot and retry buttons, which are pretty self-explanatory judging by the names, but for some reason they don't work for me here. Right here there's an interesting switch to make 2-way, 3-way SLI or Crossfire run stably. And there's also a BIOS switch button because, as you can see, there are a lot of X16 slots here. And the board even has 2 removable BIOS chips. For SATA drives, there are 2 separate controllers, so some drives can work in RAID and others in AHCI. The rear I/O selection is interesting too. Now let's see what else ASUS included with a motherboard that by itself cost as much as a whole decent average PC back then. Here we have a Wi-Fi antenna, some special bracket for installing the CPU, which I'm not even going to use because God forbid I drop the processor into the socket. A bunch of brand new sealed SATA cables, which I'm about to unpack because we'll need as many as 6 of them. Some kind of fan controller that I probably won't use either, but thanks for including it anyway. There's also a 4-way and 3-way SLI bridge, which I will be using today. And an external Supreme FX Hi-Fi sound card for the front panel of the case, powered by a 6-pin cable. The motherboard, by the way, was sold with a 6-core i7-6850K, but that one is not the hero of today's video. So I'm putting in our 6950X and moving on to the memory because as you can see, the motherboard has no less than 8 RAM slots. That's exactly why I bought a whole pile of G-Skill memory. I actually liked these fancy modules based on Samsung B-Die chips. Just look at the amount of memory here. Just imagine how many budget builds could have been made for starving children somewhere out there. But almost all this is going into one negative budget PC. Of course, this isn't memory from 2016, it's a 2020 equivalent, but who cares? It's basically the same thing. I'm going to install 2 sets of 4 sticks, this one and this one. The price would have been $700 for 8 sticks in 2016 for a total of 64 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. If the overclock goes badly, I'll leave just 4 sticks, because even then we'll still have 32 gigabytes. The Thermaltake Level 10 GT is a full tower case released all the way back in 2011, but it was still being sold up until 2016, which is why I picked it, because it's a pretty unusual machine. And on top of that, it came with the original box, which is so filthy that I just hope there aren't any cockroaches in it. Although there are free bottles included, which is very considerate of the seller, apparently. This is what this beast looks like. As you can see, it looks pretty unusual. Rumor has it BMW Group Design had a hand in it, and while I'm trying to figure out where the oil goes, I want to ask you something. Do you ever have those moments where some tiny thing annoys you way more than it should? Like, in the moment it feels huge, and then later when you calm down, you realize it was actually something really small? I get that sometimes. And usually it's not even about that one small thing. It's more like your brain is already overloaded and then one extra little problem is enough to push you over the edge. And I think that's why it's important to slow down sometimes and actually understand what's going on in your head instead of just reacting to everything. This part of the video is a paid partnership with BetterHelp. Therapy can be a practical way to slow down, reflect, and work through things with a professional perspective. It's not about instantly becoming a different person overnight. A lot of the time it's more about understanding your patterns better, handling stress better, and building healthier habits over time. A good example is realizing that when you're mentally drained, you're more likely to react to people more harshly than you mean to. You might sound more irritated or impatient than you actually want to. And noticing that pattern can help you pause and respond more thoughtfully instead of just reacting from stress. And BetterHelp can be a simple way to start. After filling out a questionnaire, you can get matched with a credentialed therapist in as little as a couple of days. They also match based on your preferences, the therapist's clinical experience, and over a decade of matching expertise. If the therapist is not the right fit for you, you can switch anytime at no extra cost, which makes the whole process feel a lot less intimidating. More than 6 million people have gotten help through BetterHelp. So if therapy is something you've been thinking about, you can click the link in the description. Or go to betterhelp.com/whataboutthepc to get 10% off your first month of therapy with BetterHelp. As you can see, judging by everything, this case probably hasn't been cleaned since around 2011. If the previous Alienware smelled like old men, then this Thermaltake smells like the old men who took Berlin or defended it. Long story short, it definitely needs to be cleaned, and that's exactly what I'm about to do, while also explaining and showing how everything is laid out inside. Oh, for the love of God, can you really trash a case this badly? The thing I regret the most is not buying a full-face gas mask before I started taking this case apart, because you won't find this much radioactive dust even in Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. While I was disassembling this case, I genuinely started worrying about my health. Dear God, what even is that? Hair or something? Ugh, I just hope it's not contagious. This 200mm fan has seen a lot of shit in its life. Here's another piece of evidence for why I think this case has never been cleaned. The cables are routed way too neatly, as you can see. My deductive skills do fail me sometimes, but not this time. Just look at this. If you gathered all this tar together, you could poison an entire herd of horses with it. Looks like a black widow or some other 8-legged brother with a severe nicotine addiction used to live here, or still does. Still, before another black widow jumps out of nowhere, I need to keep disassembling it because it's not going to take itself apart and clean itself. The case, I mean, not the spider. And overall, this case actually has quite a lot of extra ports, as you can see. 4 USB ports on the front, headphone and microphone jacks are present too, although the headphone ports hiss harder than Reactor 4. German quality, as they say. As you may have noticed, it has 3 200mm fans installed, although I'm gonna throw out the top one. You'll see why later. On top, as you can see, there are also USB ports and an eSATA port. And this thing right here is a special fan hub for connecting 5 SATA drives to a single SATA power cable. I'm not sure how wise it is to run 5 3.5-inch ADDs off one cable because as far as I know, they have a pretty high startup current, but that's a question for the PSU that's gonna power all of this. While I'm washing this case, think about it, and write in the comments how much you think I paid for this filthy Thermaltake case in 2026. I'll tell you at the end of the video, of course, and spoiler, it was not cheap. Very not cheap. So if you like this kind of content, consider using the channel membership feature. It speeds up the release of new videos because with your support, I can spend more money on content and worry less about whether it'll pay for itself or not. Of course, after the video, I sell all the hardware, but believe me, at the prices I buy this stuff, there's no way I can sell it back for the same money. Plus, selling takes time, so my little call to action is completely justified. God, I honestly thought the drain was gonna clog from that amount of dirt because you see what the water turned into? Oh, so it turns out these 200mm fans are completely transparent. Finally, now everything is almost perfectly clean and ready for assembly. I say almost, because some parts that the sponge couldn't reach are still a little dirty, but 95% of the case parts are clean. And now just look at how amazing it looks, especially the before and after parts I showed during the build process. As it turned out, despite a few minor scratches and this little metal plate right here, the case is in very good condition. There's no rust on it, all the plastic is intact. Well, almost all of it. damn electric screwdriver ruins everything. By the way, this case locks and unlocks with a key, meaning the side panel and the drive bays. This right here is the key slot, but there were no keys included, and thank God everything was already open. I tried to route the cables the same way they originally were, and I noticed there really isn't that much room for wires in the back. You'll see why later. The side panel is a work of art on its own in this PC. Not only does it have a 200mm fan, but it also has adjustable louvers that let you direct the airflow up or down, just like the heater or AC vents inside a car. BMW guys clearly didn't work on this PC design for nothing. The only remaining question is, did they leave out the turn signals because that was intentional or what? Unfortunately, the original PSU box is missing. This is an EVGA Supernova 1600 P2 priced at $400 back in 2015, fully modular, 1600 watts with an 80+ platinum rating. Just look at the size of the switch on this thing. And honestly, the PSU itself is huge as hell, and heavy too. I'm gonna hook up all the cables now and then we'll put it into the case. But as it turns out, the PSU doesn't quite fit into the slots in the case design intended for it, so I'll have to remove this plate here just to be safe. And now everything fits in peacefully. Still, running all the cables through a single opening is not exactly the smartest idea. And later on, I'm going to realize that because of that, the side panel won't close for shit, and I'll have to redo it. But for now, I'll just pretend everything is fine. Well then, I think it's time to put the motherboard into the case. Damn. Turns out the board is so wide that it partially blocks the cable routing holes. See that? Who designs this stuff? Seriously. So now I'm gonna take the board back out and shove the cables through the neighboring openings, which look like they were basically made for situations exactly like this, and then I'll put the board back in. Damn, now there's another problem. As you can see, the board is sitting too high and isn't touching the brass standoffs, and that's because these rubber rings I'm about to remove are in the way. Now it should definitely fit. Oh god, there are still 2 more left that are in the way. Finally, hopefully there won't be any more problems from this point on. Although I forgot to check whether the brass standoffs were tightened before installing the board, but that pain I'll get to experience later when I take this PC apart in the future. If you know, you know. Unscrewing a standoff together with the motherboard is a real pain. It's hard to believe, but the cheapest component in this PC is this AIO right here, the Deepcool Captain 240EX. Back in 2016, it cost only $100 and was considered a budget solution. I picked this exact one because, first of all, it's fairly common, which means you can actually find one in good condition, because finding a 10-year-old liquid cooler that's still in good shape is not exactly an easy task, especially for socket 2011. And second, there just weren't that many interesting options back then. I rinsed it under the tap a bit to get the dust off, although overall it actually wasn't that dirty. It's a 240mm AIO, as you can see, and it has some pretty interesting decorative touches, like this transparent tube on the pump where you can actually see the liquid flowing, kind of like on custom loops. The problem is, the tubes don't rotate very much. That's probably the thing I dislike most about it, because it means the best I can mount it is like this, and then the tubes get in the way of the rear exhaust fan in the case, and for that fan, or more specifically for the space where that fan should go, I also came up with something interesting, which you'll see later. For now, I'm mounting the stock fans onto the radiator. I was a couple of screws short, but later I found matching ones in my own pile and finished off the 2 that were missing. I mean, these 2 right here. And everything turned out great! The mounting system here is simple as hell. 4 bolts, 2 brackets on top, and 4 screws on those brackets, which I installed earlier, but you probably didn't even notice. And here's another reason why I picked a 240mm AIO instead of a 360mm one. The case only has room for a 240, so thanks for that, I guess. Now, let me show you the best way to spread thermal paste. First, I clean the CPU and the cooler with alcohol, then I put the thermal paste on the CPU. Then you take some isopropyl alcohol and dip your finger in it like this, and once your finger dries, you spread the paste with it. It comes out perfectly even, as you can see. Then you just wipe your finger on a napkin and that's it. There you go, a free life hack. You're welcome. This cooler even has its own little fan hub for up to 4 hands, so I'll connect the pump directly to the motherboard, and the 2 fans go here and also back to the motherboard. At the same time, I'll start gradually plugging in some of the other cables into the board as well. By the way, I think even a single 8-pin would probably be enough for the CPU, but I'm still connecting both power plugs anyway. And now, let me present to you the most expensive components in today's PC. Notice how I never actually said this was a gaming PC, even though some of the parts may have hinted otherwise? Each of these drives has a capacity of 8 terabytes, and there are 5 of them here, for a total of 40 terabytes. And today, we're gonna combine all of them into one RAID 0 array and see whether this can replace an SSD. As they say, expectation versus reality. While you're thinking, I've already screwed so many goddamn hard drives into this drive tray that you just can't live your... Alright, those who get it, get it. And as you can see, I've already installed everything and I'm starting to connect the SATA cables to each drive. I almost forgot about our front panel sound card because I do enjoy listening to music and it actually mounts very conveniently, by the way. I also almost forgot to mention that I'm not crazy enough to put the operating system on an HDD and hope for the best. So for this system, I'll be using this 500GB Samsung SSD, which back in 2014 cost about as much as an entire budget PC of that time, $500. Have you noticed that almost every single component in this PC literally costs as much as a decent budget PC, and sometimes not even a budget one that you could have built in 2016 and it would have comfortably run almost every game at ultra settings? I'm just reminding you of that so you fully understand the level of absurdity this build has reached. And I haven't even shown you the graphics cards yet. Speaking of which, here they are. And even though it looks like I bought a 1080 Ti Founders Edition, that's only the Ti box. In reality, it's just a regular GTX 1080. First of all, for anyone who somehow doesn't know, the GTX 1080 came out in 2016, while the GTX 1080 Ti came later in 2017, and this is a 2016 PC. That's for the people who are about to ask why I didn't use the Ti and went with a normal 1080 instead. And as for the box, the seller basically scammed me and sent the wrong one from the Ti version. I'm drawing that conclusion because he never replied to my message, which means it wasn't a mistake, that was just the one he had. Although, why am I even telling you this? And the second graphics card? Yeah, that's right, was apparently shipped by vendor LG personally, packed just like it came from the factory. It would be funny if he actually watches me and turns out to be a subscriber. As you can see, you don't exactly have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out that this is also a GTX 1080, but this time from MSI, in collaboration with Corsair Pyrotechnics Seahawk Edition. The blower fan here is basically installed for decoration. All the actual cooling work is being done by this liquid cooler. And since these were two of the most powerful cards 10 years ago, they're obviously going to be connected with an SLI bridge. The Founders Edition, according to the seller, was already cleaned, so there's no point in taking it apart. But as for the one with the liquid radiator, I think not only does it need cleaning, but it'll also just be interesting to see how it's built inside. I'm not going to show how I washed the radiator itself, but I will show everything else. And as it turned out, I definitely didn't open it up for nothing, because there's a lot of dirt in here. I'll wipe down everything I can reach and then start taking apart the cooling system, or more specifically, the top shroud, which is held on by 6 screws. Like I said, the blower fan here is almost illegitimate, while the main workload is handled by this pump, which I'll still clean up a little bit, but the main things that need cleaning overall are the shroud and the armor plate. This VRM thermal pad is completely dried out and has officially declared bankruptcy, as you can see. So I'm replacing it with this one here, the same size, 1.5 millimeters. After very cleverly measuring it and no less cleverly cutting it, I started removing everything attached to the armor plate, including the blower and the still somehow alive memory thermal pads. This one was especially hard to remove. So here's what I'm basically going to wash now. The armor plate, the back plate, and the shroud, which are basically the dirtiest parts of this whole construction. And then I'll start putting everything back together. Hopefully I didn't mess up and the thermal pad really is 1.5 millimeters and nothing is going to overheat on me. There's also this little MSI logo lighting here. The fan actually has lighting too, but the previous owner barbarically cut the wire for it, and I suspect it used to glow bright red, just like my background. But I'm not going to fix it now, because it's really not that important. After screwing the graphics card back together, I started test fitting it inside the case and realized that the AIO tubes bend too sharply if the MSI card sits in the top slot, so the Founders Edition will go on top and the MSI will move down to the third slot. And I'm going to mount the radiator like this. Since the CPU cooler tubes are blocking the exhaust fan from spinning properly, I'll place the GPU fan outside the case and the radiator inside. So that's my simple little solution to this problem, and I connected the GPU fan to the same fan hub as the CPU fans. The processor's gonna be overclocked anyway, so it'll constantly run high enough fan speeds for the graphics card to stay properly cooled. It already looks pretty cool, even if the cables aren't routed very beautifully. Without exaggeration, this is the best cable management job I've ever done in my life, and I will continue hiding it from the public. The computer is now in the final stage of assembly. All that's left is to put the side doors back on and peel the protective film off this karaoke machine. Damn, it looks powerful now, like some assault vehicle. German quality. As for the price I paid for all these components, yeah, it's crazy. $1,200 just for the PC parts, but to make the content more interesting, I don't regret spending the money. I also tried weighing it, and I'm not even sure I managed to do it properly, but it seems to have come out at around 25 kilograms. So let's finally plug it into power before I give myself another herniated disc dragging it around the room. To my surprise, the computer booted on the first try, but I still ran into a few problems that are worth mentioning. I had to give up on 4 of the memory modules. Yes, they work, of course, but the memory overclocks terribly. So I decided to keep only 4 sticks for a total of 32 gigabytes. And there was one more problem with the 2 graphics cards. The thing is, if you're using 2 GPUs and SLI, you absolutely have to set this switch to X2. See, the LEDs only light up for the slots where the cards are actually supposed to go for SLI, meaning the first and third slots when it's set to X2. I also compared this ASUS Music Center to my external USB sound card, the FIO KA17, and mine is still a little better. But you can only really notice that with hi-fi headphones and high-res music. If you're just listening to music on YouTube, they sound absolutely identical. If you're interested in the sound card, the link is in the description. And now, without leaving the cash register, let me immediately show you how far I managed to overclock this PC. The CPU is running at 4.4 GHz, and the memory is running at 3200 MHz with CL12 timings. And here are the voltages I used for all of this. In the benchmarks, I managed to overclock the memory by 20,000 megabytes per second compared to JDEC. I forgot to record the stock CPU results in that exact benchmark, but CPU-Z has a reference, and now it draws 200 watts, which honestly isn't that much for a processor of this level. The AIO is still managing to keep it cool. In actual games, the overclock boosted performance by as much as 30%, which is not exactly a small gain. But what's even more interesting is building a RAID array out of 5 drives. This is done here through Control+I. Of course, we need to choose RAID 0, which means files will be read from and written to all 5 drives at the same time. For a setup like this, it would obviously be better to buy a dedicated RAID card because this kind of array is easy to break, but for testing and for showing what this motherboard can do, it's good enough. Here are the benchmark results for a single drive, for all 5 drives, and not-so-budget SSD. There are a lot of tests here, so feel free to pause and take a better look. With all 5 drives, both read and write speeds increased 4 times compared to a single drive, which was enough to even beat the old Samsung SSD, just not in the 4 kilobytes file tests. Benchmarks are benchmarks. What about real-world use? I started copying 2 terabytes of random data from my budget 2 terabyte SSD, first onto a single HDD, and as you can see, across the full transfer it averaged about 200 megabytes per second write speed, while the USB SSD was loaded at less than 40%. Meanwhile, the 5-drive RAID averaged around 600 megabytes per second write speed, and the main SSD the data was being copied from was loaded at 100%. So you could probably add another 100 megabytes per second to that if the source drive were faster. The drives do heat up pretty seriously too, by the way, as you can see. And that's with a 200mm fan blowing on them from the front. But what you probably care about most is game loading speed. There's no point in showing shader compilation because that depends more on the CPU anyway. As for loading into a game, in Stalker 2 the slowest result on a single drive was 23 seconds. On all 5 drives it was only a little faster as you can see, and the fastest one, obviously, was the SSD at just 8 seconds. Even the frame time graph looks smoother on the SSD than on the 5-drive setup, as you can see. That said, there actually aren't that many games that run badly from hard drives. Another one is Kingdom Come, which apparently got suspicious that the game was running off a vinyl record and gave me a warning about it. I didn't even bother testing it on a single drive here because on the 5-drive array it took 2 minutes and 47 seconds, while on the SSD it took 46 seconds. A full 2-minute difference. The graph also makes it pretty clear who's who. Finally, I also tried launching Silent Hill, and here are the results. The SSD was twice as fast as the 5-drive HDD array. Still, that's nowhere near as dramatic a difference as in Kingdom Come. And in Silent Hill, even the graph on a single hard drive looked basically no different from the SSD. But what's probably even more interesting to you is how this whole system performs in modern games overall. And here are a couple of games I personally wanted to test in 4K. From that era, in Doom 2016, as you can see, you actually could play comfortably in 4K on this card. But in the Crysis 3 remaster, not really. As for modern games at settings like these, the new Resident Evil is absolutely playable. Honestly, I don't know whether the graph is stuttering because the game is running from a hard drive or because the graphics card is running out of VRAM, but either way, just look at what this GTX 1080 is still capable of. This card is already 10 years old, and it still lets you comfortably play the newest titles at nearly max settings. Although without DLSS, the situation would definitely be a lot worse. And here's what the CPU itself is capable of in modern games if you drop a modern graphics card into this PC. If it can handle Stalker and the updated Oblivion, then there's really no need to show every other modern game because it'll handle them too, 100%. Obviously, as a gaming PC for this kind of money, in today's reality, it's bad. But nobody said this was a gaming PC, it's more of a workstation. That's what I was actually interested in testing here, and the drives, as you can see, were not able to replace an SSD, and even the SSD itself isn't exactly enough either, but for color grading, it'll do a much better job. The two graphics cards do work. Thanks for watching, don't forget about the sponsorship, and see you next time.